Hey, welcome back to Mike's Diabetes World. Yes. Current blood sugar, we're sitting at 6.4, fully calibrated, which means I just did a reading and the pump is set up for that reading. Active insulin is 0.625. Don't have too much left. I did an insulin dose, a correction. I think it was 2.75, which has brought down my blood sugar. God, if we could speak today, it would be awesome. But hopefully we're just going to even out now. But that's where I'm sitting at now. Time in range, we're at 91%, which means we're 9% above. We're 91% time in range, which is awesome. And the last point is 7.8. Now, when I was diagnosed, oh no, forget it. I'll begin that a little bit later. Today we're going to discuss glass syringes, needles, not glass needles, but needles that you had to sharpen. We're going to sit back, relax, and we'll be right back. This channel is provided for informational purposes only. Contact your physician for any diagnostic or treatment plan. During my training, the time that I was just freshly diagnosed, I was taught how to draw up syringes with a plastic syringe and disposable needles. That was all we had to do. But then I was told, well, now you need how to learn how to use a glass syringe. We're going to be sending you home with a prescription for a glass syringe, so you need to learn. Oh my God. I had to be taught how to keep things sterile. We had to look into getting an autoclave, or we were going to have to boil with water. And then we'd have to, if I remember correctly, it's been 40 some odd years now, we had to wrap them in some sort of cloth so that they wouldn't break. It was quite a fiasco, and there were so much more problems with it. But back then, I was told that you have to utilize the glass syringes, and then the disposable were going to be used in the hospitals. And these glass syringes were not cheap. So I went through all this training, and every day we had to prepare our needle. We used the hospital's autoclave and sterilized everything. I was also taught how to sharpen the syringe needles. I really can't remember, but they would get dull and they'd start to hurt, and I never got the hang of doing it. But this was the life I was destined for. So I got my little prescription, and I went to the drugstore, and the pharmacist, I don't know if the pharmacist was a diabetic or whatever, but he said, you know what? These have just come in, and it was a bag of disposable needles. And I took them and flew with it. I didn't have to go back to sterilizing and putting them in boiling water. And then you kind of had to keep it clean, and they suggested. So I was so happy. They were monoject at the time, which was the needle I was trained on in the hospital when they first started giving me needles. I wouldn't have to sit there boil. I can't imagine having to do 2 shots a day. But back then it was only 1, but have to get up in the morning. You'd have to boil your needles, boil your syringes. You had to take them out with tongs. Well, you had to wrap them first, and then put them in, boil them. I think it was 8 to 10 minutes or something. And then take them out, draw up your insulin, and then off to school. It was a pain. Even in the hospital where you had nurses and you had an autoclave, but they were still training this. And then to go to the drugstore and to say, well, you have this choice. We can get this in for you, or you can use disposable. And this is going to be the wave of the future. In training, I was told that disposables were only used in the hospital. It was more economical for you to get the syringes and to boil. Sorry, I've had 2 interruptions, all asking me the same amount. What is my blood sugar? It's like, I don't know. But anyway, I was just so happy I wouldn't have to sharpen my needles. And I learned shortly after with the pharmacist that these had been in their stores since 10 years earlier, and they weren't really being utilized for home. I guess that's why my own thinking is every diabetic should be on the pump the minute they're diagnosed. Well, no, I still think they need to be trained on how to give a needle. Because what happens if this falters? You're going to need to know how to do it. Thinking back to that time, I should have been trained, yes, on how to sterilize, but as a backup, I kept going to this drugstore for years. And then we moved away, and I went to a new drugstore, they had them, so they were being used quite quickly. The disposable needles were finer, the needles were thinner. I could get them in, do the quickly, break the needle if I had to transport it to school, if I was running high. I could do that. But what we had to go to where we are now. Now, I have a pack of needles, but I don't utilize them. But if I did, I know how to do it. And a new kid, well, depending on the age, but let's say 6 or above, should be trained on how to give a needle. Needle, syringe, or insulin by syringe. I'm not talking you need to be on it for years, but I would suggest a good month, at least, before going on to the pump. Eventually, maybe we'll all get rid of the pumps and we'll just be getting something into our surgically implanted that we can give a needle once a month, and that would be great. So looking in, the road to a cure is a lot of little steps. Because I can still remember when I got my glucometer, it was a brick about this size. So the morning routine was, the way they were training it was, you got your glass syringe, and you need to have 2 of them because one would always be your backup. And they were something like 10 or 20 bucks each. For 1977, that was a hefty price. You had to roll it, and I believe it was a gauze type cloth. You had to get an autoclave, you had to get the syringe itself, you had to purchase the needles. I'm surprised infections didn't go wild prior to this. But you did what you had to do. When I went with my mother to the pharmacy to set up what we needed, and I took the little prescription in. He went over, yes, we have the insulins. And when it came down to, he said, they want you to use glass syringes? Well, let me tell you, I have the monojacked syringes, and I remember it because after you put it in, you put the cap, it was a big plastic thing, you opened it up, you took it out, and then you put the cap back on, and then you utilized your syringe, put it back in, and you broke it. That was revolutionized. There really wasn't big change until the glucometers came in the early 80s. And our school nurse, of course, I went to a boys' private school, but our school nurse made inroads that I was able to get the glucometer. I didn't really use it that much because I was so used to not doing it, and learning how to use the Lancet. The Lancet device was some little guillotine, like, and now I think about it, just a boom, boom, boom. So, repetition. But I will never have to utilize glass syringes. They don't even make them, I don't think, anymore for diabetic use. The first insulin I was on, or intermediate insulin, was Lente insulin, which they don't even make for human consumption anymore. The insulin I was on was beef and pork. And you could still get pork only, but that's if you had an allergy, or you could get beef only. But that was only if you had an allergy to pork. It was how much easier, even for a diabetic on insulin, and still use like multiple daily injections. It is so much easier, so much quicker than what they portrayed in the hospital. In fact, new diabetic training in the hospital is night and day better than what I went through. Back in my day, I had to walk in the snow, up a hill to and back from the pharmacy. But we have made inroads, and even multiple daily injections, which most people are started on right away, work. Now, the pumps are super, and yes, I pretty well agree that this is now the standard of care. Doesn't mean that I think everyone should be on it right away. I think in their own home style, they need to learn how to give a needle and utilize the needle before jumping to this technology. It's probably better to be prepared. I've sort of always been told that it's better to be prepared. That's why, same that philosophy that we have in traveling, is you have a backup for one, whatever it is, whether it be insulin or syringes, and then you have a backup for that backup. It's true at home. Once I got working for myself and they came up with accounting, it was the best thing that we knew how to do it, even though we're taking the steps to move ahead. So, an insulin pump may be the best we can offer for diabetic right now, but it may not be the total end. And with that, we're going to call it a day. Have a super day, and we'll talk later. Bye now. My email is mikesdiabetesworld@gmail.com. mikesdiabetesworld@gmail.com.